I'm Idiotech, and this is my PC review of Stellaris. The game retails for $39.99 US or $39.99 euros, and yes, the Europeans get screwed on this one. So what is Stellaris? Well, it's a Paradox grand strategy game set in space. If you've ever played Crusader Kings 2 or Europa Universalis, you'll have a good idea on what to expect here. However, a number of changes have been made this time around, and the setting, along with a great tutorial, make this one of the most accessible Paradox games to date. If you just want to know whether or not to buy the game, then the answer is yes. For the rest of you, let's get into the review. Now, it would be practically impossible to cover every feature this game has to offer. At the 10-hour mark, I was still being introduced to new mechanics. In fact, on stream recently, it took me nearly 2 hours just to explain the basics. It's a huge game, packed with features, and unlike previous Paradox games, they've actually managed to create a robust and easy to understand tutorial system to explain it all. They've also adopted a number of mechanics this time around from other 4X games. This is a hybrid of sorts between a traditional Paradox grand strategy and more mainstream titles like Civilization. It works extremely well and yet retains the depth Paradox games are known for. Another change compared with previous Paradox games is the way in which you begin the game itself. After picking from a list of pre-built empires or creating your own using the game's excellent customization tools, you're spawned in with control of only a single solar system. This is a dramatic change from games like EU4 where you take control of an already established country in the middle of history. The effect this has is massive, and it gives the player time to grow into the game's complexity over time rather than having it thrust upon them from the very start. These changes are helped along by the game's contextual tutorial system that I mentioned earlier.
Greetings, Chancellor. I am Veer, a prototype synthetic intelligence developed by the finest minds of our civilization to serve as your advisor.
It's fully voice acted, and every time something new happens, your AI companion will be there to help you understand it. This is a much needed feature in Paradox games. All of their previous games have sucked when it comes to tutorialization, and they have finally nailed it. This, along with the slower and more simplistic early game, make for a far more enjoyable and inviting experience. So to summarize the key changes this time around, it's the theme, i.e. the game being set in space, the adoption of more mainstream gameplay mechanics that you might see in games like Civilization, and the improvement of the core tutorial system. At its core, it's a Paradox grand strategy, and if you don't like those, you're not going to like this. However, if you played them in the past, and you struggle with some of the mechanics, you will find this game much easier to play. Next up, I want to talk about the combat. Now, this is an area of the game I still feel needs some work. Paradox games traditionally have not offered much depth when it comes to the combat, and the same is still true here. Your army will be given a rating called military power. This number essentially decides whether or not you'll win a battle. Now, there are a few exceptions to this, but as a general rule, it holds true. I would love to see some additional tactics added to this system moving forward, because right now it feels incredibly bare and lacking. You just sit there and watch the battle play out. I understand the game is very large and that level of micromanagement may be too much for some players, but they need to do something to address tactics in future games. Let's talk about presentation. So for the most part, this game does a great job in this regard. The music in particular stood out to me, and it fits the setting perfectly. The game's visuals are good as well, but not great. Each station and ship you control is packed with detail, and the texture work is solid. You also have a ton of different ship types to pick from. The textures on planets and moons are muddy on close inspection though, and they often repeat. You'll see the same planets over and over again from system to system, and it would have been nice if they'd used some kind of procedural system to generate planets. Another area of complaint I have is the galaxy map itself. If I'm going to be honest, it's about as bland as it gets. Now, this may have been done to make the map easier to read, but when you consider that you're going to spend most of your time in Stellaris staring at the galaxy map, I think they could have done a lot more work here to make it a little bit more visually interesting. Now, before I get on to my conclusion, I want to briefly discuss a few issues I had while playing the game. For the most part, it was a bug-free experience, which, given that this is a Paradox game, is a remarkable achievement. However, I did experience a few issues here and there, the main one being that my army would occasionally spawn in the center of the galaxy. Now, I was using a form of fast travel called wormhole travel, and that left me with no means of getting my army home. While this did cause me some frustration and required a couple of reloads, it wasn't a game-breaking issue, and I expect these kinds of issues to be patched out moving forward. Some other minor complaints I had were that I couldn't power down my space stations and mining stations. Each structure in the game has a maintenance cost associated with it. When times are tough, you find yourself needing to limit your production to make ends meet. Now, instead of turning them off and then back on again at a later time when it makes sense, you're forced to destroy them. It's a small complaint, but over time it adds up, and it's an annoying micromanagement element that I just didn't need. If they could fix this moving forward, I think it would greatly improve the game. Another feature I would like to see added is the ability to reorganize your ships in the Outliner. The Outliner is a simple UI element. It's a great tool that helps you keep track of your empire. However, there is currently no way to reorganize this list. In the late game, this was a point of frustration for me, and one that could easily be solved in a patch. In conclusion, if you like Paradox games, this is a must-buy. However, for the rest of you, the question is this: do you like other games in this genre? For example, Civilization. If the answer is yes, then I strongly encourage you to check out this game. Paradox games in the past have been extremely unforgiving for new players, and Stellaris changes that significantly. As a value proposition, $40 is a completely reasonable price for what you get here, and with mod support available on day one, you could easily sink hundreds if not thousands of hours into this game. If you like my content and you want to help support this channel, please like, comment, share and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.